here. So we
Good.
are
So
we are
you-
recording for this 20th day of July. Can you believe it's already July the 20th? It's just flying by here.
You
I
can
can't.
believe by the weather. It's kind of butt sweat weather, isn't it?
Oh, well,
I think
there you
that's
go. And we're right into the thick of it now. Yeah.
Well, I thought we haven't done this in 2.5 weeks, so we'd
Yeah.
probably get off to a slow start, but
Yeah.
I
Okay.
guess not.
But no, it's going to jive very well with our guest, Terry Mosher, he's already
Yeah.
standing by in the green room. And
There's the book, and I
there is the
promised
book.
Terry that I'd send it to you, and I didn't.
You did not send it to me, but that's fine.
No.
I look forward to seeing it nonetheless. And I was exchanging emails with Terry yesterday, and we were talking about a number of different things. It's great to touch base with him again. You and I have known him for many years, and he is irascible. He is talented, and you always know where he stands when he has something to tell you,
Pretty much.
whether via his art or in person. So, well, let's bring him in here.
That's
We'll talk
fine.
about the book.
Straight,
And,
no chaser.
And that's the way Mr. Mosher is, and that's the way we like him, and that's the way we need him to be, too. So, and there he is,
Checking the audio
giving us
look.
the evil
Everyone
eye.
has the audio look.
We're just
Connect to
connecting
your audio
now.
there, Terry, and we're all set.
I think
pal.
we're
And
set.
he is.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi. How
What
are
a
you?
beautiful, what a beautiful atelier you have behind you. My
That's right.
goodness, it's lovely.
And this is just the back of it. You should see the front of it.
Is that where the Mercedes is? Is that
No,
where you
no,
keep
but It's filled with books and originals and all kinds of things.
God, do you have all of the sketches you have made through the years that have, I mean, is it all beautifully itemized?
Cataloged.
Cataloged?
The
properly?
McCord Museum has 6,000.
Oh, good.
Of yours alone?
Yeah, and they're online.
All right. So they're in safe hands. So if you spill something after a barbecue or something, it'll be fine. Is what we're going to be okay? Is what you're saying?
They like those marks. It's proof they've been worked on. They love the little coffee marks. And once I didn't have any red, so I used a little Campbell's soup. They love that stuff.
A little barbecue sauce on Levesque's head.
Yeah,
Great.
exactly.
Why am I not surprised? Terry, this is such a treat to speak with you, and I know you've been busy promoting the book and doing many other things and attending to your art and your family. But as I was expressing to you yesterday via email, I had no idea that you had a relationship with Duncan Macpherson, this cartoonist, because I was explaining to you, and I'll just do the quick little prologue here.
Sure.
I grew up in Toronto in the 60s, and I delivered the Toronto Star, and Duncan Macpherson and Sid Barron were the yin and the yang of cartoonists, of editorial artists in my household at the time.
Yes, they were.
And it was such a treat to find out that you had a relationship with this person, because you, I believe, and he were cut from similar bolts of cloth, because you call him a heckler, and that's essentially what you have been to throughout most of your career. So how did you meet Duncan Macpherson in the first place?
Well, it was actually, it had to do with, it was in the 1970s, and he was sketching at the FLQ trials. He'd come down to sketch for the Toronto Star, do sketches of the Rose brothers and different sort of officials in the courtroom. And I was there doing it for the Montreal Star. So we piled out of after, and there weren't many taxis at Parthenay, if you remember. And a bunch of us piled into taxis, and who's sitting in the back of my taxi but Duncan Macpherson? And Paul Dubois, a crime reporter, said, "Duncan, have you met our new guy, Aislin?" And Duncan gives me the steely look and says, well, would you like a drink?
Uh-oh.
And I crawled out of the press club hours later, and that's how I met Duncan Macpherson.
Wow. Okay.
I saw that Terry, those sketches he did of the Rose brothers were actually chilling to look at. They're in the book. They are chilling to look at, the way
It's the first time they've been published, because the Star we just found it so difficult. But quite honestly, they're very, very real and very realistic, and show the action, all of the action that went on in the courtroom. That of course you couldn't take photographs, and them being belligerent and unhappy and that sort of thing. So he was brilliant at that. But it was so good They couldn't print them.
Speaking of the McCord, sorry, Yvonne.
No, please continue. I'll put the book cover up here while you're speaking.
Okay, because speaking of the McCord, you say in the book that you found several of Macpherson's stuff at the McCord. Is that right?
No, it's they're now in the McCord. What happened?
They're now in the McCord. Okay, because I was wondering
okay, so
why
a little
the
lead
McCord
up to this is that what happened, Dave, was I got to know him in the 70s, and then I wrote along with Peter Deborah. Do you remember him?
Of
Yes,
course.
indeed.
Yeah, Peter Deborah and I wrote a history of Canadian political cartooning. It was made into a film and also into a book in 1979, 1980. And obviously, during that whole time, I had to meet with Macpherson all the time and interview him and that sort of thing. And of course, we always ended up drunk. But nevertheless, it was a very successful film and so on, and the book. But years later, that was the look. That's the look that Duncan would give you if he was just not too sure about you. Wonderful. In any case,
he looks sane. He looks quite sane.
Oh yeah, he could be very gentle and very nice. He was just a classic case. He was a caricature of what a drunk is. He really was. I mean, because once he had a few drinks, my God, he turned into a terror. He was really something.
But you referred to him, Terry, in a piece you wrote for the Toronto Star a couple of years ago, as you referred to him as your professional mentor. That's quite something coming from you.
Yes, he was. There's no question about it, Ivan. What happened was in 76, I had a really good year in 76, as did the country. There was the election of the Parti Québécois, there was the Olympics here, and I was, people were picking up my work all over the world. And Mordecai Richler said to me, you should go to New York, because the New York Times was using some of my work. And I called Duncan and I said, Mordecai says I should go to New York. He said, screw that. He said, don't do that. You're hot. You're in the right place. If you went to New York, you just disappear among countless number of other illustrators, where you've got your own turf there in Montreal. That was terrific advice. He also advised me, he said, quit the Gazette. I said, quit my newspaper. He said, yeah, and then get on contract. They'll come begging for you to get back. You sign a contract, get off staff, own your own stuff. Best advice I've ever had professionally. So he gave me the confidence to do that. And I'm forever grateful. And that's a big part of the reason I wrote the book, because I just want, imagine the privilege of somebody who's very important in your life, and they're gone, and to sit back and to look at them carefully and write their biography. I mean, it was just something I wanted to do.
Did it intimidate you as well?
He didn't influence me so much in how I drew, but he did influence me on dealing with terrible editors and all kinds of other things.
I see. I understand better now. Okay, that's clear now.
Great advice. So
but,
forever grateful to the guy.
But again, getting back to that piece you wrote, you very candidly indicate that when you stopped drinking, you stopped seeing Duncan Macpherson.
Yeah, I had to. I stopped seeing a lot of people. Nick Oftermar, Mordecai Richler. I had to stop seeing a lot of people because I won't get into the business of getting sober, but it's quite a process, and you've got to just put a damper on yourself for a period of time and not do the same old things. You can't be hanging out in bars and this, that, and the other. So a lot of people I know were kind of disappointed that I had quit. Well, I had to, and that's the way it is in some situations. But I do value that time that we were close, from the early 1970s right through until 1985 or so. And after that, I had to take care of myself, Ivan. It's really,
I understand, of course. And Macpherson died in 1993.
He did. He never quit. He never quit drinking. I don't know that he ever wanted to. He was actually quite nervous about the idea of doing it, as were other people like Nick Oftermar and Mordecai Richler. They were nervous about it. And I think it might have scared them a little bit when I quit drinking.
Wow.
Well, it's interesting, that picture of him later in life, Terry, that you have in the book. He looks a lot older than his years.
Yes, well, I
He
put
really
that
does.
photo in, and it's a scary photo because it shows a man with cancer who's dying.
Yeah.
But he's got this huge grin and still smoking a cigarette. So, it's like that screw you attitude he had.
Right.
That's why I wanted that photo in the book.
Right. David, you
Incorrigible.
David, you made a selection of some of the pieces that you found interesting in the book here, and we can look at some of
Well,
those.
and Terry liked my ideas as an editor, so I'm honored. This one is this is his idea of Canada.
Beautiful thing. Huh?
Yep.
Oh God.
Look at that. The couple not too happy. The rest of Canada, English Canada, represented by the Scot, and then Quebec represented by the mother with these two quarreling kids. Just a gorgeous thing, and the detail in there. The guy could draw clothing, and you know why? He worked for the Eaton's catalog for years, learning how to draw buttons and how drapery fell and that sort of thing. So he brought that ability to cartooning. And it just wowed everybody in the world. In the 70s, he was very famous. The New Yorker wrote pieces on him, all kinds of things. So just a revolutionary in terms of Canadian cartooning.
Wow, that's a great piece. Maître chez nous says the tag she's holding on there. And this is an interesting one.
I love this one. This is beautiful.
This goes, he did a lot of he was one of the top illustrators in the country in the 50s before he started political cartooning. And he did a lot of work for Maclean's magazine, particularly historical stuff, wonderful things. The McCord Museum, by the way, have a lot of these things. And so this is really old-fashioned stuff in the sense that Maclean said, for our Christmas issue, we want a painting of the cross on top of Mount Royal, Montreal. So what does he do? He gets on a train, an overnight train in Montreal. He wanders up the mountain in winter and tries to get a vantage point. He crawled up the brand new CBC tower and didn't get very far because the thing was very flimsy. And he ended up doing sketches from the top of the brand new Montreal General Hospital, reference sketches, goes back down the hill, gets on a train and paints this on his way home to Toronto and arrives at Maclean's with the cover with the paint still dry.
My goodness.
God. He
1957.
could have killed himself. Look at the calash and it's beautiful.
And of course he once he gets his reference, then he plays with all kinds of things. But that's how things used to be. I mean, no Google, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
No.
you had to be on site to draw these things. So
And it makes you think of your town, how beautiful it is.
he
How
came to
beautiful your
political
hometown.
cartooning in 1959, a very, very experienced illustrator. And that's why he hit so dramatically right away in 1959 when he started working for the Toronto Star.
Well, that's 2 years after this was published then, in December of 57.
Yeah,
That's
right.
You did
interesting.
stuff for
I'd
the
never-
Montreal Standard too, right,
never
Terry?
seen this before.
Montreal Standard?
Hmm.
Yeah, the
Was it
Montreal
weekly?
Standard, everybody had forgotten about that, but that was one magnificent magazine. I had the privilege in looking for Duncan's work of going to the National Archives in Ottawa and going through page after page of print edition of the Montreal Standard from the 40s and early 50s. And my God, the artwork in there is phenomenal. You know, there are 25 books out there, just a book of illustrators who worked in the 50s. In Canada, Francis Arbuckle, Ed McNally, all kinds of wonderful.
McNally, yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. And my dad, loved Macpherson, and he wasn't in Toronto at all, but he saw his stuff in the Standard, so he was a
Oh, I
fan.
can't look at a Macpherson face, especially the Diefenbaker on the cover, without thinking of my father, for sure.
Yeah.
Because he absolutely loved Macpherson. And here's LBJ. I
Yeah.
think.
Well, there was the Company of Young Canadians, but you also had the Peace Corps in the States, and Macpherson is suggesting that it's sort of a copy of the Peace Corps. So, a little Lester Pearson is almost like a cub, and then LBJ is the actual, the pack leader, the Boy Scout, and so on. It just, they're not saying anything. But if you were living at that time and looking at this cartoon, you would understand the context immediately. The Peace Corps being American, but we have the little sort of derivative Company of Young Canadians. And then with the Joker and the wonderful details. But the first thing you see is the overall idea. Then you can go in and study the details in the cartoon.
Is
I
that the
learned that.
genius is that the genius of a good political cartoonist?
Well, there are all kinds of things that make them. I mean, some cartoonists, Dave, quite honestly, just draw simple line drawings and they're brilliant. We all have different approaches and different styles. But Macpherson was just so good and he brought so much talent to it. But imagine being an artist, but then the ability to caricature, but then add to that wit and cleverness. And he has it all, you know.
I love Mike Pearson's cowlick.
Yeah,
There's
we
another-
remember.
Cowlick, you know immediately.
And there's Pearson again here.
Yeah, this won a National Newspaper Award because there were all kinds of scandals during the Pearson regime. And he used the albatross as a symbol of the scandals. So he would stick in cartoons and people got caught onto this. The albatross tripping up the liberals or following them on holidays, or the albatross was everywhere. And here, you know, he's got his majority government, but the albatross is tripping it up with the scandals and that sort of thing.
A very ethical man, Pearson, not a great politician, but always thought of as a great Canadian.
Let me tell you about this. He traveled. This is something I got from him. He traveled. He put it in his contract right away when he negotiated. He said the Star had to pay for his travels to do sketchbooks for the Star, and he traveled all over the world. But look at this. The revolution had just happened in Cuba, and this is a baseball game at that time, but they're giving political speeches before the game can start out in the field. But at the same time, look at the characterization there. The guy selling coffee right up front. And so many different, if you've been to Cuba, you know that there's so many different faces. And you see that in there with these different faces of the soldiers and the gorgeous woman and her back there and the soldier sitting watching the game with her. Beautiful thing, isn't it?
With a cigar, of course.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
Isn't that great?
And the huge gun, big rifle.
Wait a minute, go back. Go
Okay.
back to me if you can.
Mm-hmm.
Look at who owns that original.
Can't see from here.
You can?
Oh, there you are. Now we can. You do.
Oh, I was looking at the wrong
Son of a-
place.
Yeah.
Oh my
I was
goodness.
looking at the,
Okay.
Jeez, and it's
Okay.
pristine.
I have that original. He gave it to me.
And there's no tomato soup on it or nothing. So
Well, who knows? Maybe a little bit of a Cuban cigar.
that'll be a keeper. Okay. Well, good for you. So you've kept. You're an archivist of sorts
I
for
was gonna
Macpherson
say.
here.
Well, he gave it to me when I had said to him that I was going to go to Cuba and do sketchbooks as he has. Here, look at these. And he gave me that one. And here's another one of a canton in Beijing in China. In 1979, he went there. It was his last big sketchbook internationally, actually. But look at the characterization there and the activity in the sketch.
Somebody with a face mask on.
He said that the most enjoyable part of working for the Toronto Star was getting away from it and traveling to North Africa or the Caribbean or all over the place and doing these sketchbooks for the Star.
I think we had a tough time picking just a couple because he did travel so much, but I think we agreed almost immediately on the Cuban baseball game. There he is with Bob Stanfield.
Robert Stanfield. Yep.
Stanfield is a politician a lot of people have forgotten about, but look at that face. He was such a joy to draw, Stanfield, and he had that sort of crooked eye and that sort of thing. But he said an interesting thing. He said, I used to think that Macpherson was very, very tough and almost cruel. But then when I would go back and look at them, I realized he had a point. Interesting, huh?
Mm.
Yeah, Stanfield would say something that honest.
And there
There
he
he
is.
is with his daughter. And I forget the exact line, but she's asking him because he's a conservative. And his daughter, Mimi, is saying to him at the dinner table, is it true that you're a power-hungry obstructionist, Daddy?
With that face.
Yeah, so Stanfield got the original and hung it in his washroom.
Yeah. Now there's a comment of sorts.
Well, all these stories, as you know, Dave, you read the book, all the stories like that are in this book about Macpherson. It's not just a collection of his cartoons, all kinds of things. There's the arrogance of Trudeau facing the opposition. You know, they're struggling away trying to play ping pong, and he's just checking his
Diefenbaker, Douglas,
Yeah,
Stanfield,
Cowett.
Cowett, you remember him?
Cowett, of course, Real.
Yeah, and Diefenbaker wasn't even the leader anymore. He just wouldn't go away.
Yeah, he was always in there.
Yeah.
That's so true, though. That's so perfect. The Blue Jays.
Oh, the look on this woman's face.
Yeah, terrible. Just trying to get through the national anthem in French in Toronto.
Yeah, the CNE behind her. The poor, he captured the look of fear, and I'm going to get through this goddamn thing right on the same face. It's wonderful.
Right. Of course, that actually happened at Blue Jays game. Of course, he added all kinds of other things like cheers and so on. But she was booed for singing the national anthem. This is a wonderful illustration of how cartooning were allowed to use a lot of hyperbole, exaggerate. In other words, the actual event, the woman sang the national anthem and she was booed. So what does Duncan do to point out how wrong this is? He exaggerates and adds all kinds of elements to show how stupid these people are.
Yes.
And a good cartoonist can do that without going beyond a certain point. But they add certain things to the drawing, and there you go. And yeah, the look, how he could capture expression, the expression on that woman's face.
Yeah,
and you notice too,
And she's wearing one shoe.
Draw
yeah.
draw an X through that, and her face is exactly at the center of the drawing. So you're immediately drawn.
Of course. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
This one is.
I loved. I adore this one.
This is air separatist, right? In other words, if Quebec had its own country, they'd have their own airline.
Right.
This one, like the previous one, Terry, and there's one in your book that we'll show later, in a still, if you will, gives that wonderful sense of movement.
Yeah.
Which I've always found fascinating with cartooning of all sorts, but in political cartooning as well.
Not everybody can do it, but Duncan could, and it's the proper use of shadow. They're clearly up in the air because of the shadows below them. The sort of the dust cloud behind them, and the speed lines in behind them indicates the movement, and it's very. And then my favorite is the other cop, the pilot from the other window,
looking out looking at the window. That's I like that little kind
and the arrogance of the Dutch Quebecois people.
Oh,
and it's revolutionary.
Look at the clogs.
And yeah, well, those were revolutionary shoes during the French Revolution. So he always put clogs on Lévesque.
Oh God.
Yeah.
And there's, speaking of Lévesque.
Oh yeah.
With the clogs with Lévesque with Jacques Parizeau, and he's saying our first referendum cannonball, and it's a square.
Of course, it's a tête carré. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great thing about good artists too, Terry, is you take a second look and you notice something else.
Some subtleties there. A square cannonball. Pavillon de pénalité. Of course, here we're getting into.
Yeah, you have to. He did
Bill
his
101 here.
Best he could with French, and he insisted on doing it. Even sometimes he got it wrong, but nevertheless, it's a hockey game, and one of the fans, the separatists, is saying, something about illegal use of English, but he's just pointing out the absurdity of some situations where the bill is being applied.
We got Chien Chaud and the Champ de Glace. Yeah, that's right.
But all of that contrast, you see the disapproval and the audience, but just the hockey player who just wants to get on with playing the game.
Yeah, hasn't got a clue what's going on, right?
Yeah, what the hell is all this? Yeah.
Now, what is this from?
All right, this is, he loved drawing boats. He painted boats. He owned, for a period of time, he owned his own tugboat. And he would sell about the Toronto Harbor and then Toronto Island, and they'd all get beer and get drunk on his tugboat. So he loved boats and was always drawing them whenever he could, boats in water. He was very good at it. But this is just a series of of ferries that existed I believe, in the 18th century in the Lake Simcoe area. And he just decided to paint all of the old ferries. They were long gone, but in sort of imagined situations from the time. He loved this stuff. He loved history. This guy was a great Canadian, guys. He was just a terrific, great Canadian who loved our country without going overboard. He wasn't one of those. He wasn't a Bobby Jimby type. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
He took 4 summers. He took 4 summers off from the start across the country and produced a whole book of sketches and watercolors on Canada.
Beautiful.
And this is a watercolor, yes.
Yeah, gorgeous thing.
Absolutely.
It sort of brings back a combination of Stephen Leacock and Mark Twain.
Yeah.
You know,
very good. Yeah.
Really, yeah, beautiful. And there's a.
This is a Lynn Johnston drawing, right?
Yeah, Lynn Johnston, of course, who drew For Better or For Worse. I'm glad you put this in because the admiration that all the cartoonists had for Duncan was phenomenal in his time. The Andy Donatos, all kinds of people. And we've quoted all of them and they've all told stories. So I think, again, the importance of the book is in the telling of the story. I enjoyed researching it so much and coming up with all of these things. So you have this 400-page book with hundreds of cartoons and drawings and illustrations, but also the stories. Now, Lynn Johnston loved Duncan Macpherson from a distance. Somebody told that he was ill, so she sent him this wonderful card. He got it, and Duncan said to his wife, "Yeah, it's nice, but the gap's too big in my teeth." And he had a gap in his teeth. And his wife said, "For God's sake, Duncan, your whole life you've been criticizing, exaggerating people, and somebody does it to you and you don't like it." Anyway, he laughed, but it's the last thing he saw before he died.
Oh my. So Professional Heckler, the name of the book, and we'll look at it again in a moment. But lest we forget that our friend Aislin is still at it to this day, and we picked up David picked out a few of his favorites. So this is a classic. This is a classic.
I told Terry that maybe he's sick and tired of telling this story, but what we talked about on the phone is some people don't even have to be looking at it. All you have to say is to one other Montrealer, "Hello, Morgenthaler," and they know exactly what it means.
Yeah.
They can picture it immediately.
Yeah, this is the first drawing I did that went ballistic, just got picked up everywhere. It was just, remember, I'd been working for a few years. But when he said, I had been thinking for months about drawing somebody pregnant.
Well, let's do the backfill here, because essentially what Drapeau said is that the Olympics could not do a deficit any more than a man could become pregnant. Essentially,
but that came along later. The idea came first of drawing somebody pregnant, because was, and then I could not believe it when Jean Drapeau said the Olympics can no more have a deficit than a man can have a baby. I thought, God, thank you, Jean. And he gave it to me. So I drew the cartoon. But here, very few people realize this. The editorial page editor looked at it. A nice liberal guy said, no, it's brilliant. No, I'm not gonna print that. So I'm wandering through the newsroom, grumbling about this. I said, the sports editor says, "What's wrong, Terry?" Brody Snyder. And he said, I said, "God damn, Tim Curry won't print this." He looked at it. He says, "That's sports related. I'll print it." So this cartoon actually appeared on the sports page of the Montreal Gazette.
Oh,
so
Thank you, Brody Snyder.
Good for you, Brody. Wow.
Yeah.
And what did Drapeau say about it? Did you get crap for it?
Okay. Well, one cartoon, not this one, but he woke up one morning and he called his good friend Robert Lapin, who had been the top cartoonist here in the 40s and 50s. And he said, "Have you seen that terrible Aislin cartoon in the Gazette this morning?" And Lapin went to his door. This is about 6:30 in the morning. He looked at the cartoon. He said, "Oh my God, Terry, what have you done?" And then he goes back, and it was actually Drapeau in bed with Levesque saying, "I'll be gentle."
Yeah.
Right.
And Lapalm, being very fast, said, "But look who's in the superior position today." And so by 8 o'clock, there was a request for the original from City Hall because Drapo got it.
And again, he's in the superior position. Oh God! And he's got a great face to caricature, doesn't he?
But this
You
again,
got
this is
Diefenbaker, you got Drapeau, you got Levesque. Great faces to caricature.
And I understand now why Duncan said, "Don't go to New York. You've got these tremendous array of characters there. Why do you want to go to New York?" So great advice.
But again, this is an Aislin, and one thing I've always wanted to ask you, Terry, is a lot of the drawings have these little sort of dandruff, little leading bits here. Is that?
Yeah, we all have them, even you with no hair. We all have skin flakes.
But that okay, so what? Oh, so you're confirming they are skin flakes. Okay, that's fine as long as I know.
In other words, they just to prove that you look at them and it's a humanizing factor.
Of course.
You know, everybody's equal.
Yep.
Everybody's the same. Everybody's equal. So we all
ashes to ashes and dust to dust.
But you'll love this. Occasionally I've forgotten to put the dots in and I get calls from people. Where are the dots?
Surprise. That's it, because it's an Aislin is an Aislin. So I imprint on Aislins and on Macphersons and
they probably thought it betrayed a political view, Terry.
No, because it elicits.
When Terry didn't put it in, when it was somebody, let's say you didn't like politically. I'm just thinking out loud here.
No, but I'm saying the art elicits an emotional, a visceral effect upon you because you know instantly who drew it, and then you go on to sort of take it in.
Yeah, actually, Len Johnson, who I had mentioned earlier, she openly admits that she stole my dandruff. So for better and for worse, you see all of those dots around. Okay. She admits that she stole it from me.
All right, so then I'm not losing my mind up until today. That's
good. Welcome to the small world of cartooning.
And there you go. And there's
my most famous cartoon.
And there's René's comb over too. He's got his own little bits there too.
This appeared on the Gazette the day after the Parti Québécois was elected in 1976.
Right.
And it came about because we knew it was going to happen, but we didn't. It was one of those things. The polls, the polls all showed that the PQ were going to be elected, but we didn't quite believe it. I'm down at the Gazette, and I walk into the editorial meeting right at 8 o'clock, and the polls close, and almost within minutes, it's obvious that the PQ are going to win this thing, and it's going to be a landslide. And I looked around at all the editorial writers, and they all had white faces. They're all Anglos, right? All had white faces. I'm looking terrified. And I thought, geez, I should give all these people a Valium. And I thought, that'd be a pretty good cartoon.
Absolutely.
Went back to my studio, drew the cartoon, turned it in, and there you go. It's
well, it was essentially Canadian too, because you're right. English Canada's going nuts. Pierre Berton on CTV said, "Well, the country's coming apart."
Yeah,
as Pierre Berton usually said in his understated way. But this was just okay. Like, hey, it was an election. Let's all relax. Because I remember being at the hockey game that night.
Yeah.
And the election returns were coming in on the big clock there. Remember the big clock at the Forum?
Yeah.
And as Ken Dryden said, you turned to your neighbor with whom you'd sat for years and years and years and didn't know their political inclinations until that night. And it was pretty scary, but it was nice to calm people down and make them laugh.
And
here's another point I'd like to make. And I think this is why it has lasting value for anybody who knows anything about the situation in Quebec and what happened here. This is sort of aimed at the Anglophones because it's for the Gazette. Like, okay, take a Valium, right? Relax, settle down. Well, we did. The thing is that, a lot of people left, but most of us stayed. Our kids learned French. We learned French on their backs. 83% of Anglophones are now bilingual. It happened. We all took our Valium.
Yeah.
Settled in.
And now that we look at this now, we laugh more heartily. It was kind of a rueful laugh at first.
But again, getting back to the art, that's quite the mush too. There's a lot of topography in that face, and then I mean, you just captured it brilliantly there with the teeth
I
and
like
the eyes and
topography.
the
I
mouth.
used to say geography, but I'm
Yeah.
gonna still add even
Okay.
topography in the face.
I'll,
Yeah,
I'll send you. I'll send you a bill.
I'm getting a little topography in my face too. Here I am when I was a younger guy.
And
Uh,
there's Renee again.
yeah, and that
I
was
love this story, Terry.
I won a national newspaper award in Toronto, and who was the guest speaker? But Rene Levesque, and so I got up there in my suit. Which one? About him giving me the award? Is that the story you want to hear?
Well, no, about you popping him a Valium and him popping it in his mouth immediately.
Yeah. Well, before the event, my wife met him in the room before, and she said, "I don't believe it. He's actually as short as you draw him."
Yeah, it
But
really is
anyway,
shocking when you see him.
He was a little guy, very.
I said, Monsieur, and he was very gracious and so on, and likes cartoons. Anyway, I said, Monsieur Levesque, j'ai un cadeau pour vous. He said, okay. And I gave him, as a joke, because this cartoon had it, I gave him a 10 milligram Valium. And I meant it as a joke. They were blue. And I remember putting it in his palm, and he looked at it, and he's holding his scotch. And I said, it's a Valium, Monsieur Levesque. He said, oh, and he popped it.
With his
And
scotch.
downed it with the
Wow.
scotch.
Yeah.
And halfway through his speech, he just began slurring, and his whole speech died. And I take full credit.
I love it. Great
He,
picture.
It's interesting. All of these so many of these cartoons have a story that goes with them. And I'm thinking, by the way, now of writing a personal memoir. I'm 77 now, so it will be an 80th birthday present to myself with all of these anecdotes about different cartoons and Nick Offermars and all kinds of things. So that's going to be a lot of fun putting together.
That'll be a keeper too.
I practiced on the Macpherson book, and now
Okay.
I should do it on myself.
But
That's right,
Levesque,
because you've done 50 books, but none of them have been a personal memoir.
Well, some have come close. I did a book in 1992 on how I drew Brian Mulroney with a lot of text. And another was the cartoon history that I had mentioned earlier. That had a lot of text. So I enjoy writing, and they tell me I'm okay at it, although I have very good editors who work for me. Janet Hewson, my wife's sister, has been my editor since 2008. Anything I write, a to-do list, I send it to Janet, and you know what I mean? It's just one of those.
Levesque was quite the character. I have a quick story here. As a young reporter, I went to a news conference once, and he was sitting maybe 5 feet away from me, and he was ranting and raving and screaming and spitting. Then he stops for a second because he was a smoker, and I was a smoker at the time too. We smoked Players Light. So he started patting himself down, looking for a cigarette. He looked at one of his assistants, and they said, no, we don't have any. So then he looked at me because I had my pack on the chair next to me.
Yeah.
He smiled, he pointed. I went up to him. I lit a fag for him. He took gave me a little wink, and then went back to screaming and the spit, screaming about the Anglos this and Quebec that. So
wonderful. Yeah. They don't make them like that anymore. They have to be so careful. I sometimes feel that Justin Trudeau, for example, is a very exuberant guy. He's a very smart guy, by the way, a lot smarter than people realize. But he's a very exuberant, sort of playful guy. And this stuff gets him in trouble. And you can't do that anymore. You know, Wendy Mesley, for God's sake, just quoting something. I guess
in a meeting, not even on the air. I
can still get away with stuff because I guess they're used to me or something. But my God, some of the stuff that goes on.
It's become very unusual. And
Gotcha.
Mrs. Mulroney, of course, and his son and his son's spouse, I think, are involved in all of these peripetations regarding political correctness too of late. So it's a strange world we're living in.
Yeah. Well, listen,
what made you go with the bra?
Right at the beginning, Brian loved cartoons. He said, "I love what you guys do with my chin." So I put it in a brassiere.
It's great. He's got a good set on him, Terry.
Yeah. Well, the cleavage was fun to draw, but again,
Okay.
you're not allowed to say that today, right?
Well, that explains. So this came as a result of a remark that he made to you then? Yes.
No, he
Oh.
said it publicly. He said he was
Like
talking about
cartoonists.
cartoonists. He
Oh,
said,
I see. Okay.
and he
Okay.
sort of wiped his chin sensually and said, "I love what those cartoonists do to my chin." I thought, okay,
With that
Brett.
syrupy treacle voice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now this one,
Oh,
This was
I
the
still laugh out loud.
1995.
yeah, the referendum in 1995, the second referendum, which you will remember, was a very, very tense time.
Mm.
And suddenly, Canadians were flying in, saying, "We love you, Quebec," da 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 da, and sort of cheers and the great big demonstration in Dominion Square and so on. And so I just drew this sort of convoy of people coming in to try and save the country. Of
no
course,
caption needed.
No.
No caption needed. Everyone recognized that from St. John's to Victoria.
it was heartfelt, the feeling. But a lot of cynical Quebecers, like Serge Chapelot, said, yeah, but where are they going to be in 3 days? But that was certainly a very interesting time and a great time to be a cartoonist. But then when it was over, I think the next cartoon you have was, we went back to being ourselves. A couple on their respective balconies, and one is saying, "Bonjour, Frank," taking down our "we" signs. And the other guy's, "How have you been, Sylvie?" taking down his "no" signs. So we got back to being our friendly, let's get along kind of selves. Because a lot of these wonderful things that happen in Quebec, for me anyway, these sort of great big blown up things like referendums and so on, are really out there for the public. The fact of the matter is, most of us get along pretty well. You mentioned Ken Dryden being surprised by his neighbor. We get along very well here. People come here and they expect to see people with guns in the streets or something. That doesn't happen. As somebody once put it very nicely, in Quebec, we denounce each other publicly, then we go and have lunch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think that picture of
one of the
you and
most-
Levesque.
It's one of the most civilized debates that's happened in the world, political debates.
Yeah.
The business of whether or not Quebec is going to be sovereign.
Because this could have been done May 21st, 1980 as well. La même chose,
Yeah.
But
it
by
could-
life goes
by
on in Montreal.
95 things had changed considerably, and by 2020 things have progressed even further too. So
Yeah,
it's
that's right.
Yeah.
but
So I'm pleased to do that. And then the Anglo, God, I love it. They mess things up. They get it wrong. It's still they can't even get the school board right.
Yeah.
They're just always messing up, and they're not fighting with francophones. They're fighting with each other. Howard Galganoff. I mean, what a gift that guy was. I drew 25 cartoons on Galganoff day after day after day. These, I won't say idiots, but they're just righteously indignant idiots.
Yeah. Foaming at the mouth. Terry,
exactly.
over the years, both Yvonne and I have interviewed that guy in different guises about 35 different times.
He's a nice guy, by the way. He's a nice guy.
Sure. I mean, so was
he-
Bill Johnson, but
He stuck all my cartoons up on his bathroom wall, no matter how hard I was on him.
but that
Loves the attention.
that fuel of indignation, as you say, that fuels. It's like it's a nuclear reaction. It just doesn't stop, right? So.
And you ever notice, Yvan, usually the less French they speak, the more indignant they are.
The more indignant they are. Yeah, that's right.
yeah, so true.
Now,
This
I just
is,
This is a very recent one.
a more
This is-
recent.
people that I'm still alive and still drawing, and it's changed dramatically because of the internet and because of how things look on computer screens. I'm using all kinds of new, different techniques.
That was my next question. Now is the type of what you're using as tools these days.
Yeah, well, this is still basically a drawing, but it's a lift, if you will. You can lift from Google Earth, but then you begin to sort of move objects around, move them up, move them down. It's a lot of fun, even. It's a lot of fun to play with these. It even has a name. It's the recontextualization of images. It's like the new collage, but with computer images, and you can play with it usually for a comic effect. So here, for example, Google are taking a screenshot, but then playing with things, enhancing things, and then sort of grabbing the whole of Canada and moving it up, squeezing the United States down. A lot of fun to do this, and it's very dramatic. You look at this on a computer screen and it immediately jumps up, but it's same, back to the Macpherson thing, the idea hits you right away. We've got to get further away from the United States. So then there's secondary things you can look for. So I enjoy doing this sort of thing immensely. Also, I mean, I could still be drawing, I guess, the little guys with the big heads, but how long can you keep drawing the same sort of thing? So a couple of years ago, quite a few years ago, when the Gazette, when color came in at the Gazette, 2002, they said, by the way, tomorrow you're going to be drawing in color. I said, okay, is there more money? He said, get serious.
Really? Terry Mosher said that? Really?
I think you learned that from Macpherson too.
Yeah, exactly. In any
Yeah.
case, so since that time, all our drawings in the Gazette have been color. So that was a learning curve where, not in this one, but in some cartoons now, color has become part of the humor. In other words, street lights, whatever it happens to be. So I've started to learn to incorporate this. So I'm still learning after all this time. I'm still learning sort of tricks of the trade.
But I like, you can see the texture in this, and it's...
I think it's topography, Yvonne.
It is topography.
There's the continental divide.
There's my continental drift. And
Yeah.
there's a final piece here.
And this is the
Now
latest.
here is a combination of the two. The other day, I'm thinking about, actually, the good doctor came first in this guy should be the person of the year for time, I'm thinking. So I began to put together one of those montage things, and then I grabbed a kiss and put it on his forehead. And I said, wait a minute, I should have Trump in this too. So the drawing of Trump looking very, very angry, them looking at each other. So it's a combination of the two techniques, really, when you think about it. But boy, we got terrific reaction to that the other day.
Anybody from Time call you?
Remember too, my stuff gets picked up all over the world now.
Right.
And I mean, I love Facebook. I don't like Twitter too much, but I love Facebook because it's not like old-fashioned letters to the editor. You get reaction right away.
Instantly.
And some of it pretty vile. But you can drop those people. You can just say, bye-bye, bonjour la visite, and they're gone, you know.
Yep.
So it creates this dynamic that I really, really enjoy, the business of sharing your work. And the Gazette's very good about it, because the thing is that the Gazette's name is mentioned. So that anything for a mention these days.
Beautiful piece, and I think I stuck this in at the end here, just to double back to Macpherson in the '60s in Toronto, and Sid Barron was was the yin to the yang of Macpherson in my household.
That's exactly right, Eva. He was the yin to the yang, and what happened was Duncan Macpherson had been hired by Pierre Burton. We all remember Pierre, and Pierre was a frustrated cartoonist himself. So he got the Toronto Star to hire Duncan Macpherson in '59. After a couple of years, Duncan said, it's too much work drawing 5 a week. I want to go to 3 or 4 a week. He negotiated that. And then Pierre Burton had gone to school in Victoria, BC with a guy by the name of Sid Barron, who at the time was a cartoonist in Victoria or Calgary. And he convinced the management, he said, this guy is so different from Duncan, but so funny. Let's hire him. So they got Sid to draw on the days that Macpherson wasn't in. And as you remember, Eva, it worked beautifully.
Absolutely.
You didn't know if it was going to be a Macpherson or a Barron, but they were so different. We have the same thing going on at the Gazette right now, by the way, in that once a week, we have a fellow by the name of Jacques Goldstein. He signs his work Boris, but he does brilliant, brilliant work. He's won awards all over the world for animation and that sort of thing, but he's a Montrealer and loves Montreal. And he draws a very different style of cartoon from mine once a week for the Gazette. So more power to the Gazette for actually doing that.
But this is, in a Franco-Ontarian household in the middle of Toronto in the '60s, this was something my father would howl And if you look at the cereal box here, now 17% more edible in English, and maintenant le 17% plus mangeant in French. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. But and there's always a little biplane towing that banner that said "mild, isn't it?" And
Yeah.
my father would be in tears. And it's one of the few things that my dad and I could do is make each other laugh. And God, I think of him every time I see a Sid Barron piece. And again, this is a bit of off the subject we've been discussing
No, it's not.
now.
No,
But,
not really. I think it's, I mean, look at the Garburator, Beta Garbo.
yep, it's but to me this says so much. And I delivered the Toronto Star back in the day, and it was such a part of the household. And I miss those days, and I miss my dad.
Well, I
too,
think
so.
another factor with the Macpherson book, Eva, is the fact that it's a nostalgia book in a way. A lot of people I know, one guy, he said he broke into tears at one point reading the book, an old journalist,
I can understand that.
remembering how powerful newspapers were in Duncan's time, how influential and how arrogant too. We were arrogant. Losing readers, who cares? We've got more of them. That doesn't happen today.
Right.
And so it's a look back at a magic time, not only for cartooning, but for journalism in general and newspapers and how things went on. Because I got a lot of anecdotes about how things were in that day.
Well, that's a good part to end on, because we're going to hold your feet to the fire for that book now. You better get to work on this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've only got 3 years to go, Terry.
Yeah.
Well, there's that one anecdote about Yvan Huneau being roasting me once.
Oh, yes, I
You
remember
remember
that. Yes, I do. Yes,
That's almost
right.
30 years ago.
That's right, too.
Yeah, Nick Offermar got up, and you were much better because Nick was drunk.
Nick was a few sheets to the wind, yes.
Yeah, but
And then
That's right.
Richard Holden, do you remember him?
oh my
Absolutely.
God, yes, yeah.
He got up, and I can't
Punch.
say that on your show, but he got up and he gave me the finger, and he said, "Up you, Mosher, up you," because I'd drawn some wonderful cartoons of him.
Oh,
It's
I
a great
remember.
place,
Oh.
Montreal. And Montreal is a wonderful place.
Did a sketch, and my spouse at the time was, it was a sketch I wrote about, I think you'd been to Japan, you went to study calligraphy or something like
Yeah,
that. So
sure.
we told the story in Japanese and in English of Terry going to Japan, and of course in Japanese, people, the person looked very disgruntled, and in English, everybody was very happy, you know, so it was a kind of a strange thing, but I remember that very clearly. But there's so much water under the bridge since then, Terry, and so much stuff. I hope you can get it together to put this on paper, or at least record it or do something, because
Oh, I plan to. I've started it. I've
okay.
started it. And what I do, this is again another advantage of the computer. Occasionally on Facebook, I'll say, "Here's another one for a possible memoir," and I'll tell a story about Bill Lee, old spaceman Lee,
Of
or
course.
something like that.
Yeah.
And I can judge by the reaction. If suddenly people get discussing it and back and forth, and oh yeah, there was the time he did this. But if it falls flat and people just say meh like that, I realize it doesn't work. So,
You still like the Pope.
anyway, I'm going to have a lot of fun doing this. As I say, come to my. Hopefully, we can have book launches again
In
at that
person.
time. This is interesting too, by the way, with this Macpherson book, is that even though it is my 51st book, it's a whole new ballgame in terms of how to promote the book, because I can't have super launches anymore.
Right.
I can't even have book signings. So we're trying to figure out new ways of publicizing, a lot on the internet, but it's catching on. The Toronto Star did 2 pages on it. As you know, I think the Gazette did. The Globe and Mail has a review coming out this week. So it's catching on.
There it is, and there's a cover again. Are you going to
Thank
get
you,
back
Dave. Wish my
into
book
the
were-
back to the
Cheers.
Znaimer talks too, Terry, eventually? Or?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Moses Neimer in Idea City. I love doing that.
Yeah,
He-
that's good.
He just lets me do whatever I
Oh,
want.
because you look like you're having a really good time on that stage.
Well, it's Idea City talks are the Canadian equivalent of TED.
Right.
And you show up and they wine and dine you and host you. Well, I don't wine anymore, but you know what I mean. You hear 50 really interesting speakers in June in Toronto. Best month to be in Toronto. You'll remember from delivering newspapers, best month.
Yeah. Yeah,
And,
Snyder's always doing something to.
Oh, he
change
doesn't
things
stop.
up.
He's a lot like
Yeah.
you, Terry. He doesn't quit. He's always
Yeah,
been cooking somewhere. Yeah.
We're exactly the same age.
Yeah.
And I like to tease him a little bit to say he
This has
sold
been
out
great.
Toronto. I stayed home.
Yeah, there's
Terry-
another Montreal boy. Yeah.
You've been an absolute delight as usual. Thank you so much for giving us of your time. And we could go on for hours, but this has been a real treat for me. Thank you.
And thank you, Ivan. What I want to do, by the way, because suddenly Zoom is the thing, and I'm going to get some advice from you
Yep.
on how to present graphics. I just got a call this morning from Korea, and they want me to appear in August on Zoom, talking about the future satire after the pandemic has passed, and that sort of thing. It could be interesting to present some work. So I'll need some advice on that.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
We can connect after we're done here, and I'll be more than happy to give you a hand.
It's too bad. It used to be they'd fly me to Korea, but anyway, now it's Zoom.
Yeah.
Anyway, there you go.
Times are
That's the way
changing.
it is.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Terry.
It
everybody.
was really good to talk to
It was
talk
a
to
lot of
Terry.
fun. Thank you
Thanks
very
a lot.
much.
You've been very gracious.
Thanks.
Cheers.
We will reconnect later. Okay. Wow. My goodness. An hour as I was expecting. And
Lots of fun.
there's a
and
whole lot of
there
stuff
could have
going
been
on
all
there.
sorts of things. You know, the impact of a political cartoon rather than an editorial. You know, you could contrast that. We could have gone on all day.
But I'm glad that he's considering. I'm glad he's at work on something, because can you imagine the tome that's going to produce? My goodness, because he's known all these people, and Macpherson and Barron, and he knows people across the country, and young and old, and he's watched them come along, and he's given them advice and all sorts of things. So
Yeah.
there you go.
It was good to reconnect, bud.
Yes, it was. We will reconnect again soon. Have a good day.
We'll talk to you soon.
Ciao.